This is the CrinEar Reference, and I heard a prototype of this over a year ago now, and at the time I wasn't that into it. And since then, Crinacle, that is, has made several changes to this product to the point where I feel this is, as of filming this right now, one of the best IEMs currently available on the market. This is very, very good. And that's not just because of its sound quality. So there's lots to get into here, so let's get going with the video. Okay, so a quick disclaimer here. The CrinEar Reference is, of course, an IEM by Crinacle. Crinacle is a friend of mine. He did send it to me. The reference is available at hangout.audio, but it's also available in North America at headphones.com. Now, of course, I haven't been paid to say anything in particular about this IEM, nor has the fact that Crinacle is a friend of mine caused me to pull punches on his products in the past. If you look on my IEM ranking list, it's linked in the description. Some of his products I liked quite a bit, and some of his products I found to be nearly the worst sounding things of all time. And if you know anything about my preferences and my value system and how I feel these products should be tuned, it will make perfect sense why I feel this is the right direction for IEMs to go in. Now, additionally, if you are looking for more information on the CrinEar Reference with more comparisons than what I'm providing you with here in this video, there will be links in the description to articles from Listener and FC Construct on our team. That'll be posted up on headphones.com, and make sure you guys are subscribed to the channel if you're interested in additional comparison points. We'll be putting out a video here in the near future that compares this to additional products that are available on the market that I just don't happen to have in right now. So with that out of the way, let's get going with the review here and talk about the reference. And let's start with the build quality, the design, and the comfort as usual. So with the reference, you get a number of accessories, including this case. I like these styles of cases better than the puck style of cases because I have an easier time putting them into a bag. Additionally, you get a bunch of different tips, and this really does matter because with the CrinEar Reference, you get possibly the best selection of tips that I've come across with any IEM. It really makes sense when you consider what the sound quality is that you get here with this product. In a way, you actually kind of get two different sound signatures depending on the tips that you use, and I'll talk about that more when we get into the sound quality, but I just want to let you guys know that you get the standard bore tips, 3 different sizes, you get the short wide tips, which is 4 different sizes, and then you also get the shorter bore tips, which is again 3 different sizes, along with some foam tips, but who really uses foam tips anyways? If you use foam tips, you should feel shame. No, I'm joking. I also use foam tips from time to time. That's my admission to you guys right now. I feel shame. One other thing, you do also get a 4.4 Pentacon connector for the termination here because Crinacle has provided you with a cable that has a swappable termination. This is sort of standard fare at this point, and it makes a ton of sense, and I'm glad that brands are doing this. Now, here's the IEM, and this is the cable for it. I don't find it to be overly tangly or unwieldy or microphonic. This is just a super normal cable, and that's all I have to say about it. But what I do have lots to say about is the shell. This is very, very, very good. This is one of its strengths, at least in my opinion. Now, the shell itself is made of machined aluminum, and it has this fairly no-nonsense, understated faceplate on it. As I've said in many of my reviews, I like this kind of stuff better than the flashier designs that you commonly find. I do wish this had less of a shiny luster to certain elements of it, but there is kind of like this brushed character or brushed quality to the shell itself. It has a kind of matte visual to it, similar to what you find with the Prisma Audio Lumen, and then it has some accents in here that are fully reflective. And I kind of wish that those weren't there, but that's just part of the logo that you have here. So for me, the visual design of something like the Lumen is better, but the CrinEar Reference is very good. But for the shell itself, this seems to fit in my ear perfectly. In fact, it fits in my ear better than just about any other IEM that I have used. And I believe the reason why is because the nozzle has a longer distance to it compared to the fatter part of the shell. So if you look at a shell design like what you get with the Prisma Audio Lumen here, the Lumen is actually a smaller IEM. And I'll be comparing it to the Lumen a lot because they have a very similar sound to them, and they are both extremely well-tuned IEMs, despite being at vastly different price tags. But if you look at the contour of the shell where it connects to the nozzle, the Lumen actually has a fatter part to that piece relative to the other parts of the shell. And that fatter contoured section there just doesn't exist on the reference. In fact, it's kind of subdued down, and this creates further distance for the nozzle to protrude from. This means that I have an easier time actually inserting this IEM into my ear than the Prisma Lumen, despite the fact that the Lumen is notably smaller. And if you've been following what we've been doing here on this channel, you'll know that there are issues to do with IEM insertion depth and the effect that that has on the sound quality. The nozzle is not the smallest, it's at about 5.6 millimeters at its fattest point, but for me, this fits exceptionally well, and it has a positive impact on the sound. So let's get into the sound quality next. Now, before getting into the super nerdy graph stuff, I just want to let you guys know how this sounds. It's called the reference, it's meant to be neutral, or at least it's extremely close to that, because as always, how people hear IEMs is going to vary dramatically depending on their anatomy. But if you just understand how this performs relative to the landscape of IEMs that are out there, this is the one that has taken all of the benefits of the newer developments in IEMs in recent years for the mid-range and upper mid-range, and not screwed up the bass and treble like most other IEMs tend to do. Now, if you're coming from other recent IEMs that have come out that are sort of the new meta style of tunings, you're probably going to find the reference to be less U-shaped or less V-shaped. And you might even find it to be neutral warm, because a lot of IEMs up until recently have gone for unhinged levels of sub-bass, and in order to balance that out, go for gobs and gobs and gobs of upper treble. This is just what brands have been putting into the market because that's been following a trend that's been popular of late. And the problem with that is that it tends to obscure what's awesome about this new development in the mid-range. And if you're interested in learning more about that and understanding that better, Listener will have a deeper dive into that in his article, so check that out in the description. But just from a basic sound quality perspective and how this sounds, it sounds neutral. Thank you. Finally, some neutral f***ing IEMs. Now, I know what you might be thinking. Well, at least some of you guys are thinking this. Neutral is boring. Why would I want something neutral? I want something to sound exciting and special. I don't want something to sound flat. Flat doesn't sound good. Yes, it does. See, if you actually hear something that does sound neutral, everything is revealed. When you get something that is fully neutral, two things tend to happen. One is that you get this overall sense of completeness to your experience of the music. There's stuff that you end up hearing that you wouldn't have noticed before because it was buried or masked due to various colorations of some sort. And again, most people haven't actually heard a neutral sounding product in headphones or IEMs. They think they have, and maybe they've gotten close, but they probably have some colorations going on. And this does lead to certain kinds of masking. It actually obscures clarity. Now, there's some ways of doing this tastefully, and this is where a lot of the sort of technicalities that people seem to enjoy come from. But there's another way to do this, and that's by unveiling. Nope, not that. Unmasking. Let's go with unmasking. Being able to actually just hear more of your music for your string instruments, for your piano tones, for your electric guitars, your oboes, your hurdy-gurdies. All this stuff comes through with so much more clarity and definition and immersiveness than when it's obscured by unhinged levels of bass and treble that's just going blah, 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 blah over everything else, and it makes it sound bad. So when you're listening to something like this, you do start to get that sense of, there it is. There's that extra element to the clarinet that I know is there, but I couldn't hear it because it's being drowned out and masked by this feature at 5 kilohertz that's just obliterating my eardrums that I don't even know about. This is the difference when you're listening to something that actually is unmasking the details rather than creating these sort of tasteful colorations that can be enjoyable in their own right. And I believe this is a worthwhile distinction to hold in mind when you are considering headphones and IEMs to purchase. Is it something that you're going to have editorialize your music? Is it something that's going to make it sound a certain way? Or is it going to reveal your music? Now, the second thing that happens is you can turn the volume up a lot louder than you otherwise would. And now, as always, be careful with how loud you listen. But if you don't have various peaks or elevations, say in the ear gain from like 3 to 5 kilohertz, like the kind of stuff that you would get with Harman-tuned IEMs, you can actually just turn the volume up louder without getting fatigued by the music that you're listening to. And speaking of music, this is the other benefit to this style of tuning. It's versatile. For a lot of IEMs, you may find certain tracks work exceptionally well because there's a unique flavor going on with that product. But then when you listen to something else or you start listening to a wider range of stuff, you realize, wait a second, that sounds harsh. That sounds wrong. The timbre is slightly messed up here. I don't like the way that cymbal sounds. And then you continue to buy IEMs. You continue to chase things that are going to make that sound good. Or you think, well, that's a bad recording. I should stop listening to bad recordings. While it is entirely possible that you could be listening to bad recordings, you're probably also listening to playback equipment that is coloring the sound, that is exaggerating certain things, and sometimes with certain recordings, that sounds harsh. That sounds not quite right. And so when you have a product that is more neutral, you get better timbre and you get more versatility. And so that is why I think this is such a good direction. But there's actually so much more to talk about here because I actually feel you do get two kinds of sound signatures or two versions of neutral. Let's get into the measurements here to talk all about that. As always, I've done the measurements here on the B&K 5 and 2.8, and we have shown this relative to a new diffuse field baseline. This one we're calling the headphones.com IEM diffuse field baseline. It is similar to the JM1 diffuse field baseline that many of you guys are familiar with if you're reading Crinacle's graphs. It's just that we made some improvements to it based on the canal transfer function of the 5 and 2.8. If you're interested in learning more about that, there'll be a section on this in the article that we post on this as well. But let's take a look at the graphs here. So this has notably less sub-bass than something like the Meta or the Daybreak or the High Senior Megafest or the Duna Da Vinci. You get the idea. But what you lose in bass quantity, you gain in bass quality. So what this means is that you get a tighter, more nimble, more tonally rich and impactful kind of bass rather than this slower, more sluggish, booming kind of bass that is typical of common IEM releases these days. It's not going to be the unhinged levels of bass that you find with more typical new meta style IEMs, but it does still actually have quite a bit of bass to it. Like the bass is not lacking here, and the quality is significantly better rather than the droning, plodding, loose bass that you get with most IEMs that are coming out these days. So I really like the bass on this, and it's the kind of bass that I want to listen to more. The mid-range is also exceptional here, and in my opinion, this is possibly the best mid-range that I've come across. I actually like the mid-range here better than what I get on the Prisma Lumen, which is a $1,400 IEM. And if you're wondering what good mid-range actually is, this is a great example of it, where the lower mid portion is well balanced with the upper mid and lower treble portion, making it so that things don't sound lean, they don't sound shouty, they don't sound, too honky or aggressive. It's not fatiguing, and I really appreciate that. In contrast to a lot of Harman style tunings of the past, this is very obvious improvement of what the new meta styles of tunings were able to give you. It's just that, as I said earlier, most of those tunings had their mid-range buried under enormous sub-bass shelves and ridiculous spiking upper treble. The reference allows the mid-range to be the star of the show, which is what we've been wanting for this new style of ear gain presentation, this new style of ear gain tuning in these IEMs. So I love that about this. And then we get to the treble, and this is where I have one little issue with this IEM, which is that with the standard bore tips and the short bore tips, I do find the lower treble portions to be just a little bit forward for me. I notice this mostly on tambourine sounds or certain percussive sounds where it just has a little bit of that tonal focus more towards the lower portions of the treble. But that's where we get to the short wide tips. And these tips slightly change the sound signature. It's more of a down tilt, so I actually think the short wide tips make this more of a neutral warm kind of sound signature, whereas the other two styles of tips give you a more neutral presentation, but it depends on the sensitivities that you might have. And if you are more sensitive to lower treble issues, the short wide tips would be the way to go. And this is, again, where I have to really commend Crinacle for including a wide variety of tips and also being intelligent about the types of tips that he uses. But to talk a little bit more about this, I'm going to move over now to the measurements done using my own HRTF. If you've been following what we're doing, you'll know that this involved a visit to a lab in the UK to get our HRTFs. This is all super nerdy and complicated stuff, but in short, we were able to effectively turn our heads into headphone measurement rigs. And with IEMs, we're able to substitute the impact of our heads and ears on the sound for the generic population average pin effects that we use for baseline calibration in in-ear headphones. So think of it as now we are calibrating this to my head and ears. Now, just like before, this is showing a fairly neutral, straightforward downslope. But the main difference here is going to be in the treble, where we are substituting our ear effects into the system here. And there are some differences here, notably the way that this IEM is propagating upper treble in my ear compared to how the average person is going to hear it. So I'm hearing a little bit less upper treble than what I think might be typical of most people. But for the rest of the features, it's pretty similar. And once again, if you compare the different tips, you can see how the short wide tips are making that lower treble region that was standing out for me a little bit more relaxed. And this is why for the standard way that I use these IEMs and how they typically fit in my ear, I like the short wide tips quite a bit. However, I was able to do something with this IEM that I struggle to do on most IEMs, and that's again because of how good this shell design is. When I use the small tips, the small standard bore tips, so not the short wides, I am able to actually insert this IEM further than I can with most other IEMs. So further than I can with something like the Lumen or just about anything else that I've tried in recent memory. So right now, this is how I would normally wear this IEM, right? Or wear it with the short wide tips at least. And you can see this part of the IEM sticks out a little bit from the front part of my ear. But watch what happens. I am able to push this IEM back in my ear, so further back that way towards the back of my head, and I can actually insert it further past that initial bend that I am typically running into with most IEMs. And I'm able to do this, again, because of the contour to the side of the shell that is lower down, meaning there's more nozzle there. Because of the contour to the side of the shell, I'm able to actually fit this into my ear more deeply. I'm able to basically turn this into an edemotic and just jam it in there, making the length mode issues that I typically have to endure with most IEMs so much less of a problem. And if you're new to this and you have no idea what I just said or what a length mode resonance is, for IEMs, the treble contains a pattern of resonances that's determined by the length of the air volume between the driver and your eardrum. And how large or how small your ear canal is influences where this resonance is and how punishing it is in the response and what you hear. And one of the more punishing length mode resonances can show up anywhere from 5 kilohertz to 9 kilohertz depending on the person and their anatomy. And for me, it more regularly shows up at around 6.1 kilohertz. With a CrinEar Reference, I don't seem to have this problem at all, which is wonderful. Now, just to hammer that point home, let me go through some comparisons here and show you what I'm talking about. So again, my main comparison point here is with the Prisma Audio Lumen, which is way more expensive. It's $1,400. The reason why I'm comparing it is because the sound signatures here are very similar. And as you can see here, the Lumen also performs extremely well, just with a bit more bass presence to it. And in a way, the Reference is basically a less expensive Lumen with a more contoured and better fitting shell design. But because of the way that the Lumen is propagating sound in my ear and the way that it fits in my ear, it causes the lower portions of the treble to dominate over the rest of the response. And on the Reference, this doesn't happen. I will say using the short wide or coffee tips on the Lumen does improve the problem area for me in that lower treble region, but it's still not quite as smooth as the Reference is for me, to the point where I don't get this compression issue really at all. Again, there's a little bit of hardness there at around 4.5 kilohertz. That's really my only nitpick with this IEM. Now, the other interesting comparison that I want to make is to the CrinEar Daybreak. And the Daybreak is also a well-tuned IEM, particularly for the mid-range, once you use the coffee tips or the tips that are now included in it. The original ones, not the best. Overall, the difference between the Daybreak and the Reference is that the Daybreak is the more V-shaped one, the more U-shaped one, the more bass and treble focused one, and the Reference is the more mid-range focused one. And quite frankly, if you are looking for a more U-shaped kind of sound signature, I would recommend the Daybreak. But there are also already a ton of other good options that have a competent mid-range, just with way more bass and treble, like the Dunu Da Vinci, like the High Senior Megafest, like Crinacle's collab with Moondrop with the Dusk Default DSP. But why I'm enthusiastic about the Reference here, and also, partly the Lumen, is that with these new products, those recent developments in mid-range optimization are able to shine in ways that they were never able to with those other products. Now, I'm going to give you guys a ranking of the CrinEar Reference, but just before I do that, if you guys found any of this valuable, or if you want to support what we do here, we actually have a members program that we have up on headphones.com, and we also have a membership here on YouTube where if you want to see some of the behind-the-scenes testing that we do here and how all of this works, along with just chatting with us on live streams, you could sign up for that, and it buys us a coffee, and it also allows us to purchase other items to get in for review that we wouldn't otherwise be able to. I'm going to give you guys a ranking now for the CrinEar Reference, and in fact, this is going to get the top spot for me in my IEM rankings as of right now. So for the bass quality, the CrinEar Reference is fantastic. The mids are exceptional, some of the best that I've heard, and the treble is also very good, just with a bit of a forward quirk there in the lower treble, but not nearly as bad as some of the other IEMs that I typically come across. And add to that the fact that you get these subtle differences in the sound signature depending on the tips that you use. And importantly, the fact that it's versatile enough with these different tips to accommodate various different, anatomical features of a wide variety of individuals, I'd expect. This is going to get the top spot. This is going to get a 7.5 out of 10. So good job, Crinacle. Well done. I almost feel like it shouldn't have been called Reference, or people shouldn't be thinking of this as flat, because there's almost like this negative connotation to that, when really there shouldn't be. But that's a thing that we got to deal with in this space. People are often wrong. And with that, that's going to do it for this review. If you think I'm wrong, let me know down in the comments below. But also, you can do so on our Discord. You can chat with me. That'll also be linked in the description. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Bye for now.